All right, we're live. Welcome to another
Woo.
exciting edition, action-packed edition of Peanuts from the Plebs.
Well, I do want to say
Take a break.
that we do have an exciting announcement that now we are at 25 subscribers.
I saw
so
that.
I would like to thank our first 25 subscribers for watching.
I'd like to especially
That's
thank the
amazing.
25th subscriber, whoever that was, because, I mean, 25, that's a watershed.
That's a cool.
So
That's a cool number.
that's great. And yeah, I mean, putting our voices out there, and hopefully it resonates with some people. And we'd love to get your feedback too, if you have some
Yes.
especially positive feedback, but we'll take the negative feedback as well. Where are we going to start today? I mean, it's been not a really busy news week. I mean, we have all these crises in progress, but as far as new things,
a lot of huge things going on. It's like you're in the 10th week of the Black Plague. It becomes old hat, that they're.
Well, I did want to talk about the news of those companies that got the PPP, that how they released the PPP loan details of all the companies that ended up getting the money, the loan.
Oh yeah.
And it was the PPP loan. It was supposedly for small businesses, right? And it's supposed to be for businesses with 500 employees or less. And obviously in the news, the one name that was really thrown out there a lot was Kanye West's name, right? And mostly because it's like he's supposedly a billionaire, right? And he just recently congratulated his wife, Kim Kardashian, for becoming a billionaire. So apparently, the billionaires, they need their help too, I guess, right? But I did want to point out certain companies that got this PPP, because I just thought it was just so egregious that these people got this money, right? So again, you have Kanye West, but supposedly the list that came out, it was for the companies that got $150,000 or more. That was the whole thing. So there are other companies, obviously, that got the loan, but the smaller companies which did not get at least 150,000, they're not on the list.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so one of the ones that really stood out to me was Joseph Kushner Hebrew Academy, it's named after Jared Kushner's grandfather. And we know who Jared Kushner is, right?
Right. Yeah.
Son-in-law of Trump.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some other Trump connected folks.
And that foundation got $1 to $2 million.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
The transportation secretary, Elaine Chow's family business, she has a family business, they got between $350,000 to $1 million. Okay. You got PF Chang's, which got 5 to 10 million, because PF Chang's is a small business, right?
Wow.
TGI Fridays got at least 5 million. And then you also have religious groups that got money, right? So you have the Archdiocese of New York got between $5 to $10 million.
Yeah.
This one really blew me away. The Ayn Rand Institute.
right.
Oh my Lord.
Okay, this libertarian think tank organization, okay, they got between $350,000 to $1 million. Forbes, the media company, got $5 million. Washington Times got $1 million. And even political organizations got money. So the Florida Democratic Party Building Fund got at least $350,000, as well as the Women's National Republican Club of New York. And then the other thing that really blew me away was that, like I said, supposedly this was supposed to be for companies that had 500 employees or less, right? But
Right.
they came up with a list of the top 40 recipients, the ones that got the most money. And the top two companies, the first one was J. Alexander's Holdings, which they got $15.1 million. And they have 4,200 employees. And then number two was Fiesta Restaurant Group, which got a $10 million loan and has over 10,000 employees. So how is that a small business?
Yeah, I'm also reading that 3 branches of the Church of Scientology got. I mean, that's just that's horrific.
And then you have that like 13 million, supposedly 13 million gig workers have been receiving unemployment, which makes up 41% of the people who have been taking advantage of the extension, of the unemployment benefits, because normally people that are independent contractors or gig workers, they don't qualify for unemployment, but because of the legislation in the CARES Act, that it was extended to them, right? So
yeah, I talked about my neighbor actually is independent, and he was able to get unemployment because of this. It's obviously cutting into his business.
Right. Yeah. But so these people, thankfully, they were able to take advantage of these unemployment benefits. But again, this is about to expire in about a week or two, right?
Right.
And and also the pushback that you get, from our legislators, especially the Republican side, is that they don't want to extend the unemployment benefits because it disincentivizes people to get back to work.
There's that whole argument. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When you're still, we're still watching the number of cases of COVID and trying to tell people to be really careful, and that means they need funds to do that.
Well, first of all, the Payroll Protection Program, I mean, it was written very quickly, the legislation, and it's wasn't really well thought out. So it was not really directed at, the obvious sectors that would be affected, retail, hospitality, the restaurants that would be affected by the pandemic. It was based on small business, right? So 500 employees theoretically, or less. And it's based on payroll size. So, it depends what your payroll volume is. And it was you take that, whatever it is, and you take 2.5 months worth, 10 weeks, and that's what your loan is based on. But it's not clear, what you're supposed to do with that. So let's say you're just supposed to, when you apply for the loan, you say, well, I believe my business is being affected, or I believe it will be affected by the pandemic. So if you think that it might be affected by the pandemic, you're eligible to apply for this loan, which will most likely turn into a out and out grant, right? But in theory, it's a loan that you have to pay back. But how do you? So when you get this money, do you hire people? People who don't have work, do you hire them, just keep them on payroll and don't have them do anything? So if you own a restaurant, does that mean you just pay the people? You pay your cook, your dishwasher, whatever. You're not operating, but you're paying people with this money, and they're just going to be sitting around doing nothing, or what? It's not clear.
And you're saying you don't know whether or not at some point it'll be deemed to be not a loan, but a grant that you don't have to pay back.
Well, you have to remember that, was it, like a month ago, that they announced they passed the those changes to the PPP loan that would essentially, it made the requirements for forgiveness more lax, right? Where they had more time to be able to, hire back their employees, and they didn't really have to hire back all of their employees if they could show that they weren't able to. And you do have companies like United and, obviously the airline companies, they were bailed out. And a lot of them are coming out now and saying that they're going to lay off like 35,000 people.
Right. So, they did the minimum requirements for the loan. They kept the people employed for that period of time, but then they have no intention of keeping people on long.
Which is
long
the same,
term.
right? It was the same thing that, always happens with various, tax forgiveness, tax deals, right? Where basically bring your giant corporation here and guarantee that there's this many jobs. And then the lawyers look into it and they go, we only have to guarantee the jobs are there for a year. And then we can sack everybody and keep that tax deal, And they look, people with lawyers, man, they always do great.
Yep.
I don't think the idea of the payroll, I mean, the payroll protection is not a bad idea because it's similar to what happened in, I guess, in some European countries. They basically just paid everyone's payroll to keep people employed, because that money that if you're paying people, paying to normal working people, they're going to mostly spend that money, right? They're going to spend it on rent. They're going to spend it on
Right. Yeah.
food and the basic
Keep,
necessities,
keeping the basic economy
and keep
going.
the
Yeah.
basic economy going. They're not going to
Right.
just, do stock buybacks or something. I mean, normal people are
Yeah.
just going to spend that money. So in that sense, it makes sense.
But there's so maybe I'm still confused. It seems to make all the difference in the world to me if I know it's a grant versus a loan. If it's a grant, I'm like, well, that there's no danger of that money coming out of my pocket. I'm going to hire back some people and pay them, even if they are essentially don't have a lot to do, right? Just because I'm doing a good part, and I want to keep my workers for when times get better, that they're in a good economic standing and they can come back and work for me.
Right. That's the
It's
idea.
only a loan, and you don't know if you're going to pay it back. You're essentially swallowing a loss if you're going to keep people on the payroll when you're not actually making any money, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and the conditions
Doesn't
of
make
the
any
loan,
sense.
it's a 1% loan, and it's a very generous payback. You don't. So basically, it's a very, even if you have to pay it back, it's almost like free money because it's a very low
Right, but
low interest rate.
the issue is that these, first of all, that remember that they ended up having to extend this PPP loan because of the fact that the first round of it, the money was gone so quickly because you had all of these big companies, like I just read out some of them, who took
Right.
all of the money, you know what I'm saying, and they left
Yeah.
nothing for the small businesses. So
Well, that's not quite
for those,
true. That's not true because actually the number of businesses that got PPP loans is quite substantial. I mean, isn't it in the millions of businesses that got PPP loans? I believe it's quite a. I don't think
in
it's
the
true.
in the first round, or in totality.
I think
Because
in the
remember,
first round.
like
In the
I said,
first round.
they ended up having to extend it because there were so many small businesses that actually didn't get to take advantage.
Well, that's true, but I mean, there were quite a few businesses even in the first round that got funding through the PPP. So I don't, yeah, I don't know that. I mean, how many billions of dollars were in the PPP? I mean, it should have been more, but maybe it was like $400 or $500 billion, right?
I thought
Total
it was
the first round.
4.9 billion.
Is that it?
I thought that was the number that I saw. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it would be. I thought it was more than that. So we have to verify that. But even so, I mean, if you have a few loans at like whatever they were, 15 million or whatever, I don't know. You'd have to look at the whole spread. I mean, how many companies actually got loans? What was the average? The average loan amount is like
honestly, what you're arguing right here, it doesn't make a difference because ultimately it's like Kim Iverson. She actually talked about this, and I thought the way that she put it was really well. It was the fact that it was our government set it up so that it would be some trickle down sort of economics, where because people would still be on the payroll, or these companies, they still got their money so that they could keep people on the payroll. That was the incentive, right? But ultimately, a lot of these companies, they ended up doing stock buybacks and all this kind of stuff. Like I said, a lot of these small businesses were not able to take advantage of this. And even then, it didn't really make all that much of a difference because guess what? They weren't getting millions of dollars. A lot of them only got, what was it, like 15,000, 10,000? Wasn't that like the average for the real small businesses?
I think the average loan was 100,000, so around 100,000. So
for every small business.
well, under 500 employees, that's the definition of a small business according to SBA.
But I mean, how many companies were not under 500? Like, if you look at the top 40 companies that got it,
right,
they actually, the majority of them were well above 500 employees.
Okay. So I don't know. I mean, but that's not the requirement of the program was 500, right? I mean, wasn't
right?
it?
But because it was written so vaguely, right?
Right.
All these companies were able to take advantage. And I mean, if it actually did help the people, then it would be okay. But it hasn't helped the people, right? Because the people are still struggling. And again, this whole trickle down economics, it didn't work, right? And so I agree with Kim in that she called for everybody needs to be ousted come November. Like literally, just get them all out because they all failed us.